Do you have an appointment with the dentist? Well, Psychotog is here with this deck tech on Gro-A-Tog, a way for you to grow your Quirion Dryads and also grow a Psychotog to 20 damage out of nowhere. A really, really cool deck. So this archetype is a bit of a hybrid between aggro control, tempo, and control. So it can play any of these different axes. One of the main things that you would do is choose a lane that you want to play on, whether you want to play an early threat like a Quirion Dryad, and then fuel the ++1/+1 counters with all of your cantrips like Opt and so on. The alternative is to play the control game early and then suddenly turn the corner with one of these threats, ideally a Psychotog, because the Psychotog will allow you to exile all the cantrips from your graveyard that you've spent in the early game to set up that position. So this is kind of what we often call like an aggro control deck, the ability to be able to pivot from one or the other archetypes. This is also a really, really popular deck popularized by Lani or Lani Nini. Make sure you go and check the links in our description because you can see 3-hour-long essays about detailed descriptions of which cards to choose and what the advantages are on one or the other. If you want the summary, this is what this deck tech is. Just really to give you the cliff notes to start your deep dive on Gro-A-Tog. So we've mentioned growing a Quirion Dryad and we've mentioned Psychotog. These are the two premier threats. Most times you'll find that Gro-A-Tog lists have some combination of these numbers. You might see anywhere from 4 of both or fewer. You might also see Meddling Mage pop up. This is a type of card that you want if you're in a combo-heavy metagame. In a combo-heavy metagame, having a Meddling Mage in Game 1 allows you to, within the first couple of turns, recognize what your opponent is on, name a key card, and then be able to tempo them out before they're able to remove it, dealing 2 damage a turn. You often see Meddling Mage jumping in from the sideboard, so you may have some combination of up to 4 Meddling Mages between the main and the sideboard. Some decks may run 0 of them, and this really depends on your metagame. Now, we're talking also about the glue that holds the deck together. In reality, the deck is actually a small number of cards. You've got threats, your Psychotog and your Quirion Dryad, and then you've got answers like Swords to Plowshares, and in some ways, counterspell, hard official counterspell, or Fire and Ice, which can be a removal spell or a tempo card. Now, the rest of the cards basically find those cards. So cards like Gush are a really, really good way for you to be able to build card advantage later in the game. And they're also an excellent way to fill your hand, then discard your hand and kill out of nowhere with a Psychotog. The other types of glue that hold your deck together are cantrips. So you have Opt, which I mentioned before, a really good way to select your cards. You don't just want to cycle with your cards, you want to be able to select specifically cards. That's why cards like Sleight of Hand might pop up anywhere from 0 through to 4 copies, depending on the style of deck that you like to play. This allows you to effectively reduce your deck down to the fundamental pieces, the best possible pieces, and then ways to find those best pieces. This is what we often call Turbo Xerox. Essentially, you're just going to repeatedly print out the best cards of your deck, and what you do is you use a cantrips to essentially print more copies of finding that Psychotog that you need or that removal spell. Now, you'll also notice that the card Accumulated Knowledge is in this deck. We mentioned Gush as a source of card advantage. Accumulated Knowledge is effectively one of your main source of card advantage. So you'll often see this as your 4 of in the deck or a 0 of if you're going to go down a different path. If you go down a different path, you're going to find it hard to play the control role. Accumulated Knowledge allows you to draw 1, 2, 3, cards and so on, enabling you to fill up your hand, especially when you're playing the control role. Now, there are other cards in here that you'll see as flex slots. So Armageddon is a flex slot, and I'll mention that there's one Armageddon in the main and there's one Armageddon in the side of this deck. The reason that this particular list has strange numbers here and there is because effectively it is an average list. Going through all of the top 8 performances of Gro-A-Tog on MTG Top 8, you'll be able to see what types of cards perform well. Some people play them in twos, some people play them in zeros, and so on. So this is really effectively your deck list that splits the difference. So use this one as a version that you can springboard your own choices off, whether you want to go down to 0 Armageddon, in which case you need to find a way to be able to punish the decks that need lands in the later games, like control decks and so on, where you can protect an Armageddon with your counter spells, you can gush around your Armageddon and so on, or punish the combo decks like Replenish that find it really hard to dig back into the game when you have Armageddon away 3 or 4 of their lands, and you're tempoing them out. So I mentioned these flex slots. You'll notice that the sideboard is a combination of a variety of different flex slots. And if you choose to play Annul, or you choose to play Ray of Revelation, or you choose to play your traditional Disenchants and your Seal of Cleansing and so on, that's entirely up to you. You'll find there are pros and cons for all of them. Obviously, Ray of Revelation being better against enchantment type matches, and also having the ability to be able to discard it for extra damage here and there through your Psychotog, and still be able to cast it from the graveyard. You'll notice that there are other flex slots in here as well, like Gaia's Blessing. Often you want to run 2 Gaia's Blessing or 0 Gaia's Blessing. So I put this card in here in the sideboard to remind you that you're probably going to be playing either 2 or 0. So there's a 1 there. Just note to yourself whether you want this to be a different flex slot or not. If you want to cut something else and play 2 Gaia's Blessings, this allows you to really grind out opposing decks like Stiflenought. Stiflenought has 4 ways to win the game, those 4 Phyrexian Dreadnoughts, and if you're able to run them out of Phyrexian Dreadnoughts before you run out of cards, then you're going to be able to keep recycling your deck and eventually win through a really long grindy game. However, they know that that's your game plan, so they bring in Brain Freeze, and your 2 Gaia's Blessings will ensure that you don't lose to Brain Freeze as long as you've got 1 in your deck. And likewise, if you ever cast 1 and shuffle your 3 Swords to Plowshares back into your deck, you can then use your other Gaia's Blessing to shuffle the original Gaia's Blessing back in, i.e. you need 2 or 0. There are also staples that you'll see from almost every other deck, like your Hydroblast. Note that Hydroblast is better than Blue Elemental Blast in this deck, simply because you can cast it targeting something that's not actually red, so that you can put a +1/+1 counter on your Quirion Dryad. So you don't actually split the difference between Blue Elemental Blast and Hydroblast in this particular archetype. Same with Pyroclasm and Engineered Plague. I've split these two, but you'll notice that some decks will play 3 Pyroclasms, some will play 3 Engineered Plagues, and so on. It's really your mileage may vary. You need to decide based on your local metagame what you want to play. So you'll notice that the land base is quite eclectic, so be aware that you actually have 4 City of Brass and 4 Gemstone Mine. But where's the Mox Diamond? Well, go and look at any of Lanny's essays about Mox Diamond. They're really, really good videos, and they'll give you an idea of why this particular version of the deck, when we refer to as Moxless Gro-A-Tog, is actually becoming popularized as the version of Gro-A-Tog. So we won't wax lyrical around why we're not playing Mox Diamond. It's not a budgetary concern, it is actually based on the build. Now, using your Gemstone Mine and your City of Brass, these are the 2 ways that you can generate multicolored mana for your Psychotog and Quirion Dryads and Fire and Ice and so on. So you need to be really aware that there are only 8 sources of multicolored mana in your deck, which is, again, why Gaia's Blessing can be a very, very useful card. When you're playing against a Wasteland type of deck, and they manage to wasteland you off your City of Brass, and then you've used all of your counters off your Gemstone Mine, and you've got a Quirion Dryad stuck in your hand, you'll be really happy to use your Gaia's Blessing to shuffle sources of multicolored mana back into your deck, because otherwise you may have no other way to play them. This is also an 11 island deck between 7 islands and 4 Flooded Strands. Note that you need a critical mass of islands to cast Gush, and based on Lanny's hypothesis, the ideal is 12. So in reality, we're actually quite low on our island count, and this is why you might see newer versions of this deck running 3 Gush, making sure you're not so reliant on that particular metric. The same if you're going to go down the days route. Note that there's no days in this, there's 1 days in this version of the deck, and that is again a reminder that you could go 2-3 days, you could go 0 days, right? It's really based on your approach to the deck and whether you want to play the early game aggressor or whether you want to play the late game aggressor turning the corner, and that will tell you whether or not you want to play Daze. But a staple of the deck is, of course, something like, let's say, foil. I mentioned your island count. Remember, there are times that you need to keep an island in your hand and play your Flooded Strand out, even though it will deal you 1 damage and you know it's always going to find the island and you're thinking about deck thinning. The main thing here is you might need the island in your hand to be able to pitch to a foil. You can always get the islands back into your hand through a gush, but you can't always rely on that, especially being such a low island count deck. There's also one other flex slot that I will mention, and that is the peak. So you'll see some versions of this deck running 2 peaks. You'll see some versions, or many versions, running 0. I've placed 1 in there as a reminder. You could choose to split the difference here. You can run a sleight of hand and so on. Meddling Mage is a really nice synergy with Peak, especially if you don't know the format very well. If you're new to Premodern, you can quite literally go up on Peaks and up on Meddling Mages, and then use that as a reliable way to learn the format. Once you get a really good handle on the format and you can recognize what your opponent is on from turn 1 based simply on the land that they play, then you won't need any peaks at all. You'll be able to generally consistently name the key card that you think is going to be relevant using a Meddling Mage. So overall, the deck is a really, really awesome way to play Premodern, especially given its budgetary concerns. Note that this version, as we said, doesn't have Mox Diamonds, not strictly worse, it's actively the way that it's built. You'll see that the price tag is a little bit on the steeper side, but fundamentally that's because we've got these really, really nice fancy old borders. So let's have a look at the version of the deck if you were to play all the cheapest versions of the cards. And here we go. So the price tag comes in at just over $300. So that's a pretty good number. Now, it's entirely up to you whether you want to pimp the deck out, or if you wanted to buy the cheap versions of these cards, play it, see if you like it. Just go through, play as many F&M Premoderns as you can, get a feel for it, and if you really like it, then you can upgrade your cards if you want to go for the old retro borders. But fundamentally, you can get a playable version of Gro-A-Tog for around $300, which is excellent, especially given that many of these are flex choices. So cards like Sarbo's Web being a flex choice, if this is not relevant in your meta game, you don't have many land still decks or opposing decks that have lots of treetop villages in them, then you might not even run the Sarbo's Web, and you can save a bit of money there as well. So give it a go if you're interested, sleeve it up, and especially if you're interested, go and check out Lanny's channel. Did you just call the dentist? Because you've got an appointment with Dr. Teeth. Now, this is a deck tech on Psychotog. Now, Psychotog is a deck that you might find...
Gro-A-Tog. Let's try it. Let's do it again. Do it again. Take 2.